Hello and welcome to the program. My name is Marie Yambo. Today we're coming to you from the Da Vinci Hospital. And as you can see, I'm dressed differently. This is because I'm in one of the surgery rooms, and this is the standard dressing whenever you are in a theater, and this is just for infection control. So today we want to focus on burns, their long-term effects, and its management. It's 2 p.m. and 31-year-old Samuel Mbethe arrives at the Da Vinci Hospital in Nairobi. It will be his sixth surgery to correct burn injuries around his neck. Dr. Alex Gonga is one of the plastic surgeons who will be performing the corrective surgery.
But how are you feeling otherwise for the procedure?
Samuel developed contractures around his neck. This is one of the complications of burns, which occurs when the scars mature, thickens, and tightens the skin.
Very common complication that we see, contractures in any region that you can think of, the neck region, through the elbow, the axilla, any joint can be affected.
But before the surgery, Samuel undergoes medical checkups, a routine he's repeated many times since the fateful day 11 years ago when his girlfriend almost ended his life by dousing him in paraffin and setting him alight.
So ni mtu nilikuwa najua, and we had been together for like 9 months, 10 months. That's the period I knew the person. And we had an argument. She came with a matchbox kwa nyumba. But on her way coming, she was ranting and saying things that really hazikuwa zinanitrigger ni kama ni something niko in danger or something is going to happen. She's like, Mama Kelvin, just unajua mimi naweza ua. So Mama Kelvin was there like, this is a joke. Wewe unaweza ua nini hata kuku inakushinda? So she was like, hata mtu naweza ua. So to me it never came out like it's something that is gonna happen. So she moved, akakuja kwa nyumba kidogo. Me, I was just lying on my bed. I think she used a cup or something, a cup or a plate. She poured the paraffin on it and then akanitupia na akawasha is at that moment. The first thing when she poured the paraffin, iliniingia kwa macho. So I felt that irritation. So nikatupa mkono nikashika, I think it was a towel or just a sweater. I can't remember well because I used to hang clothes along. I used to live in a single room. So ile dalili najipanguza kwa macho, that is the moment now she managed to lit na akawasha. So at that point me nilikuwa tu nimewaka napiga nduru watu wanisaidie, and it was really not an easy thing, and by that time alikuwa ametoka amekimbia.
While fighting for his life at a hospital, his ex-girlfriend was arrested but later set free.
I was actually shocked 3 months after this incident happened. That was from 17th of October to around February. She was charged and actually released on no witness has ever come to the court. While I'd written to the court that I'm hospitalized, I cannot actually come out and really air out the issue.
Today's surgery is a delicate one. It requires harvesting of the skin from his thigh.
It could be taking a piece of their skin, it could be taking a piece of healthy tissue to cover that defect. So that's all an effort to release the contracture, cover the resultant defect, sustain that with physiotherapy so that the patient's functionality is at least near normal, if not fully restored.
The previous surgeries were to ensure that he gains movement of his hands.
The hands were like tight hivi, singeweza move on my own, and then the neck ilikuwa hivi. So when it was released, the hand was free to actually move. Then on this side there was not much, it was more physio and a small cut that was done on this side. And then it was able to make the hand more free. This is new, it's not from that time. This is where now they got the flap, and then it was interconnected to the neck.
Dealing with psychological and emotional trauma has been the hardest in his journey of seeking healing.
Started taking alcohol, became an addict, up to a point of one of my cousins who really saw what was really disturbing me and started talking to me and really put everything into like an open, and then you get to understand you have an issue that you've not clearly understood, and the only time I can help you is if you start talking to me.
A victim of gender-based violence, Samuel has come full circle.
People need to learn and get to understand that even us as the survivors, you need, even if right now I'm niko kwa another relationship, something might trigger, mtu akiongea might trigger what happened back, and you feel like you want a revenge. Revenge is never the best thing. The best thing to do, actually, the best revenge is just to move on with your life.
And moving on, he has. Now a husband and a father of one, Samuel hopes today's surgery will give him a new lease of life.
What I've always been hopeful and looking into is to just have my neck free, to move freely without any restrictions. Because I find myself sometimes when I'm driving or doing an activity, I'm restricted. I have to move the whole body. Because if you can clearly see how I'm seated, the whole weight is already here. So if I have to relax my shoulders, then I have to bend a little bit so that I feel comfortable. That is the goal that I want to achieve. The financial aspect of it is very wide, because burns is a process. Burns management is a process. You might end up getting well instantly, or you get well after a period of time. That means financing is also an aspect. So that is all that I'm looking into. I wouldn't say I'm 100% okay, because every time I look at myself, there is always that trauma that comes. But I've learned not to allow it to come like and affect me mali niko sahi, because from where nimetoka ndio mbali. The remaining part of it is very, very small.
And to speak to us about this is none other than Dr. Alex Gonga. He is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So first, let's start by addressing the issue of burns. And could you talk to us about the different types of burns and what happens to someone when their skin burns?
Burns will come in different forms depending with what has caused them. What we commonly see, what we've seen mostly are open flame burns from fires. You're exposed to fire. Sometimes it's caused by boiling water, boiling liquids being poured. We are boiling water and then it spills over accidentally and causes burns. We see that commonly. Unfortunately, we are also seeing a rising number of high voltage electric burns. Something though that we would not expect if we have a proper housing infrastructure and good planning of how high voltage is wired in our societies. But unfortunately, because of the rising of these illegal housing infrastructure, you sometimes have high voltage injuries. So because of the high temperature that burns expose your skin to, the skin will be injured and will be lost. And with it comes the loss of the function of the skin, which was its ability to be a barrier to infection, its ability to help regulate your temperature. All that is lost, and what remains is a wound through which you can lose so much fluids during the acute phase, and after that might trigger an entry point for bacteria for infection. And later on, if there isn't proper management, you might have scars and depending with the region, if it's affecting joints, you can have contractures. It's quite a debilitating trauma for anyone, and very costly as well to manage, which is unfortunate in our societies that most of the victims are from poor and low-income backgrounds. So quite a trauma for such victims.
So in your area of practice, are you seeing a lot of burn victims? Like, are you receiving a lot of burn victims in your area of expertise?
A lot of burn victims during the acute phase, soon after they sustain burns. Because of our role, being plastic surgeons, being the primary team that handles burns in the acute phase, resuscitating, managing the wounds, and then taking them through the journey towards the reconstruction of any defects that will result from those burns. Including what you can imagine, just the wound that is there. That wound will need pain management, that wound will need wound care, that wound will need to be covered.
So when does someone know that they require surgery?
That's a very important question. So you can look at it from the point of just the surface area, how much of the skin has been exposed to the burn, and there's a fraction of your total skin, so you can create like percentages from low 10%, 20, 30%, depending on the total surface area that has been injured. So you can look at it from that angle, or you can look at it from the depth of the skin that's been involved, okay, from superficial to deep, depending with how much of that skin is. As you can imagine, the higher the percentage is, the higher the amount of trauma and injury that patient, that victim would have sustained. The higher the depth, the higher the injury that victim would have sustained.
So when you talk about, say, 60%, 80%, what's the depth then? Because the skin has layers, isn't it? So does it mean like there's the dermis, the epidermis? So just getting to understand how deep it has gone.
Okay.
Yes.
So whenever you hear us talk about percentage, in that aspect we are only talking about the surface area. Yeah, just the surface area. How much of the skin has been involved? Is it just 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 60%? Which has been involved. So that's focusing on the total surface area. Then when you talk about degrees, when you ever hear like this is superficial, deep, now we are talking about the degree of depth of that.
So an 80% would be like at what level?
No, 80% is surface area. So that means if it's 50%, we're talking about almost 50% of your skin has been lost.
Okay.
Then when you talk about degree, we are just highlighting it's deep, it's superficial, depending on the depth. Yes,
Okay.
The deeper it is, the higher the degree, the higher the percentage, the more skin that's been affected by that injury.
So what are the complications that come with the burns, especially when it comes to wound management?
So what we have commonly been seeing are the wound inflicting a scar, and depending on where the scar is, it will have limitations as a result of it limiting the abnormal appearance of the scar, as well as some causing contractures in case of if it's inflicting itself across a joint. As you are aware, our functionality, our ability to fend ourselves is all because of our ability to move the full range of our joints. And you can imagine in case you have a limitation in one of our joints, that's quite a huge deficit in your ability to function. So imagine if a scar is at a place where people are seeing, that will definitely affect your self-esteem because of that scar on your face, scar on your neck, and even just the memories of that trauma of the burns will have depressing mental status of affected patients. So these are the kind of challenges that, some of the challenges that burn patients will have in the long term, in addition to a whole lot more other complications that they have. Like what I said, the unfortunate thing is also that you're talking of a community most of the time that's low income, and because that's where we have most of the burden of burn cases, and that's all that management seems to be a lot costly for them. The good news is there is intervention that can help correct some of these complications. For example, contractures, that limitation on the joint, that scar tissue can be addressed, can be released to allow for movement across the joint.
So how do you go about that?
So it starts from the time the patient has been burnt, then being appropriately managed at a hospital, then the wound being appropriately dressed, the wound being appropriately taken care of, the wound being appropriately covered in case it's deep, then the physiotherapy that's required for such injuries that are across the joint to sustain the range of movement across the affected joint. But unfortunately, in case that is missed, you then have the abnormal scarring, you then have the contracture, which you then have to go in, release the contracture as much as you can to allow the movement to come back to normal, cover the resultant defect, depending with how much defect you have created, and sustain that with physiotherapy with the goal of retaining the function of the affected area.
So in the case of reconstructive surgery, when somebody has to come in, like the flap and all that, could you explain to us what does that really entail?
So it entails that in some of those reconstruction, in some of our efforts to release the scar, you might create a defect. You create a defect. The defect or wound that you have created will need to be covered. You use the person's tissues to cover that. It could be taking a piece of their skin, it could be taking a piece of healthy tissue to cover that defect. So that's all an effort to release the contracture, cover the resultant defect, sustain that with physiotherapy so that the patient's functionality is at least near normal, if not fully restored. So the patient is able to fend for themselves, they are useful to themselves, to their surrounding people, and to the community at large.
Okay. Now, I just want you in brief to talk to us about wound or scar management. Because is it the end that if you come for the reconstructive surgery, then you forget about it, you're back to normal? How should a burnt patient, for instance, take care of their scars?
That's actually very good. Because in addition to the acute management of the burn wound, it's very important that they don't forget to take care of the scarred area of their body, and that includes things that they will be prescribed to by their primary plastic surgeon, including applying ointment on the skin, massaging it, and limiting exposure to sunlight on that scar. And depending with how the scar is progressing, they will be guided accordingly if there is any additional intervention that's required to that particular scar. Burn injury in general is something that will require them to be interacting with their primary surgeon fairly for a longer time to manage both the scar and any other associated complication that can arise from the burn. So it's not a once-off management in the acute phase. It's a journey that they would have created with their primary plastic surgeon, and there will be need for follow-up. All they need to do is to constantly go back to be reviewed by their plastic surgeons, board-certified plastic surgeons at the hospital near them.
So thank you so much, Dr. Gonga, for taking the time to explain to us what burns are, the wound management, and even reconstructive surgery when it comes to the issue of burns. And thank you also back at home for taking the time to join us today. We hope that you've learned a lot in as far as the types of burns are concerned, the wound management, and even when it comes to the reconstructive surgery on a burnt patient. So thank you once again. My name is Marie Yambo, and hope to